that, her brother was the foreman and she had greater freedoms there than she would. And that, she's kind of traded some of these freedoms, more of these freedoms for this kind of gilded cage. And so she has no interest in going until the Duke comes, the hero, who's Cortland. He's an identical twin. And so his brother is her father's man of affairs. And the Duke is like her brother, the hero's brother is just methodical and just very direct, and he's not the charmer. Like Cortland he's a rogue, and he can, get ladies to do any, well, not I guess not like that, but he could, he's good with his persuasion. And so it makes sense. He's like, I'll go, she'll never know. And so he goes there and he presents this idea of a world for her. He realizes that she has this one book there, and he realizes that she's interested in natural science. And he, starts speaking to her of like, you can go to the museums. And so he paints this world, and then, and she goes there. And then she's like, this is not what I signed up for. And then she sees him, and it's actually his identical twin. And he's cold, and he's not at all the charmer. And she's like, what is happening here? But she's able to piece together pretty quickly, even though they're identical, that this is not the same guy. Yeah. And so there's a lot of, and he's so charming, and he has a big family, and they both come from these big loving families, which is, something familiar that I write about. Like for me, families and big families are something that I love, and, noisy, boisterous, and his sisters are troublesome, and he plays pretend, swords and soldiers with his sisters. And so, his problem is he's in need of a fortune, and she's an heiress, and he just does not want to be a fortune hunter. He really is head over, he head over toes is what he says for her. And, she'd had her heart broken before. So it's kind of a reversal. A lot of times we see the hero, and he, he's had his heart broken, but this guy is not. He doesn't know he's never met anyone like her. And she's like, I've had my heart broken. I don't want to, but they form a real friendship. And so, I've seen like, they talk about slow burn. And so some people say this is a slow burn, but, I always talk about like friendships and relationships. And, for me, my husband is my best friend. We've been together since he was 15 and I was 17. Right. And so, you learn that the relationships, because he's my friend, we've been able to weather being, poor, and the hardest things of, our son having multiple surgeries. And like, it's important that, I always say there's passion, and that's what, we love in our romance novels. But man, when life is hard, and when you're in lockdown, and, the whole world falls apart, you want your friend at your side. And that's really who the hero and the heroine of this book are, friends and lovers. So, yeah.
I love this. Oh, yeah. So readers can pick up this book because it's already out.
Yes. That's the good thing, right?
That is a good thing. So pick up this book. So let's chat about some. What's your reading journey, like reading romance journey? Did you grow up reading it, or late in life? What was it like?
Okay, so I grew up reading it. 13 years old, I was at my aunt's apartment in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and I could still see it. She had a coffee table, and on their coffee table was Jude Devereaux's Eternity, and it was like a mail order bride story, and it was this gorgeous cover with like, remember how it was like the embossed, like raised flowers?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? And so I picked it up and I read that, and I was like, that was it. Like, and so I was 13. And so I read it and my mind was blown. And she had such an extensive backlist of materials, in romance in, the early 90s, and then, going back into the 80s was she did medieval, and she did, Western, and, Regency, was different. But I was like, I am only reading Jude Deveraux, and I binged everything. I remember like going to the bookstore, and because I would get gift cards for like Christmas from my family, buying all the books. And I still remember the day that I was done. And I'm like, what do I do now? And like, it felt like a betrayal because, at the time I'm like, I can only read one author. And then I discovered Julie Garwood.
Yeah.
Like The Gift and The Secret. And I could just, her Scottish romance. And I'm like, I didn't think there could be anyone better than Jude Deveraux. And then I'm like, Julie Garwood. And then, and then I moved over to Judith McNaught. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, it's not just like that there's only one amazing romance author. It's just that they're all amazing. It's just romance is amazing. And so I never stopped reading it. And, I had a love of history, and it was the period. Like I've always had an interest in the period. And so, it made sense when I went to college that I was going to go for history.
Mm-hmm.
And, I grew up in a very working class town, and I was the first woman in my family to go to college. So for me, I was going to be a teacher, right? Like that was, we'd, but I wanted to write. And so I, remember just even talking to my parents, and they were always supportive, but we were also, like, you got to feed, how are you going to, you could survive as a teacher, and you could still write because you get summers off, which we all know is the biggest fallacy of the world, right? Like, like teachers get all this, but you don't. And so I ended up, reading and writing when I was a teacher, like at, when I should have been sleeping, because it was the only way to do it. But and so I never looked back. And it was, and then, to be honest, I also read outside my genre. I'm a huge Jodi Picoult fan. Like, I like to be ripped apart when I read, like, because I guess I torture myself like that, but she just guts me. And I like to just like, Me Before You, Jojo Moyes, like, and people are like, you read, wait, what? Like, you love happily ever afters. And I like I like to craft them. And I love the idea that you could, there's going to be the guaranteed happily ever after. But I also love having this feeling of just having my heart ripped out too, because I'm perverse like that, I guess, and like to punish myself. But I think it's good to feel that emotion, and because that's life too, right? Like, to have your heart just,
ripped apart.
Make
it right.
Right, exactly.
It is so good. So do you have any books you recommend our listeners to pick up?
So I cannot recommend enough. So I mentioned Laquette, who's my accountability partner, and she writes contemporary, and she writes for several different lines, but she the series of hers that I'm currently reading, so she has a book that's out, One Night Expectations, and it's this family, it's the Deveraux Ranch, and there's a grandfather, and he's this patriarch, and and it's very much like my jam. Like, he's interfering, but in a good way, which is similar to the Duke of Bentley in my series. But he's, there's this misunderstanding, and he's trying to bring his family together. And so, Laquette does a really good job of, like, her books are so sexy, and they're really emotional too. Like, she just paints such a beautiful world. And so I haven't read her One Night Expectation yet. So that's on my list. And I'm trying to think, Stacey Reed's to think of the title. She has it's out at the end of June. A Matter of Temptation.
Yeah.
That's on my Goodreads list as well. And I'm a huge Stacey Reid fan. I had the opportunity to blurb her, and that I always, I always, you get, sometimes requests, and authors will reach out, and it's like, I love, right. Like it's like, cause I've had to do it. It's like, oh, I'm sorry to ask, kind of. And cause that people are, but Stacey Reid, I'm like, oh, please. Yes, definitely. So I had the opportunity, to read her, one of her works in advance. And so I love Stacey's work. And, I'm in the middle of editing, and I have to turn in my last Berkeley book of the series, the third. Well, no, it's the third in the series, not the last, but that's due in September. So my summer is now trying to juggle, right? Because now everybody's home. So I'm like, editing, which, like I said to you, I would rather write a brand new book than edit a book. Everybody's like, edit. I'm like, I know they're important. I know they're good. I know that it's essential. It's kind of like, going to the dentist. Like I'm not a fan of the dentist, but I know that I need to do it and that it's important for me. And that's kind of like edits too. I hope my editors don't care that I said that about compared edits to the dentist. But there we are.
It is so good. It's just like, there's some parts you love, and some parts you're like, okay, yeah, I can't.
Yes.
It's have to bear
with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Christi, tell us where you can find you online.
Okay, so you can find me at my website, which is christicaldwell.com. I'm also very visible on Facebook. I'm newer to Instagram, which I'm probably dating myself. I'm on Twitter a lot as well. Yeah, so you can find me there. And I don't know if I've mentioned, I took up baking during the pandemic too. Ooh. And I became like a baker of cakes because it's just fun. So, if you're interested in not only books, but looking at the latest cakes that I've created.
Yes, I am definitely going to be looking at that.
It's I always say it's like, it takes me, weeks and weeks to write a book, and a cake. I'm a real slow baker, but I'm good at it, but it takes me a long time, but it still doesn't take as long as it does to write a book. So I can see the product and I have fun. So it's like creative, and my kids get to eat it. So it's like everybody wins.
Gold star. You get a gold star after you finish it.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christi, for being on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me. I loved chatting with you, so I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other romance recommendations, please visit watchrenextblog.com. Did you know you can purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore? With Libra.fm, you can pick up more than 250,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company, you know the name, but you'll be part of a different story, one that supports the local community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to squeeze more reading into your busy life. Listen with the free Libra.fm app while you do your chores, walk the dog, relax at home. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen next, check out recommendations from people who know the best booksellers. The Watch Read Next podcast has a special offer for our listeners. Get two audiobooks on Libra.fm for the price of one with your first month membership. Use code WatchReadNext. The offer is valid only for new members in Canada and the US. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Please visit frolic.media/podcast to discover new shows to tune in. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.